Hello, welcome to the attic. If you're new here, hi. You've got over 400 videos to catch up with, so please go and visit the playlist for journal making, card making and my real French life, or if you're in a hurry, try the coffee break tutorial playlist for quick ideas while enjoying a cuppa. Please subscribe and do hit the like button when you enjoy a video because it really helps me to grow my channel and I appreciate your support. And if you're a returning friend, hello again. Today I'm looking at using transfer paper that you can print yourself because I find it really thrilling to be able to do that sort of thing. And the transfer paper that I've used just goes straight into my printer and I can print off any designs I want. The designs that I have chosen to work with today are from one of my kits in my Etsy shop. I'll provide links below the video in the read more description box, and I want to show you how you could do exactly the same and print off and use some old dies and maybe use up some metallic papers and cardstock that you might have in order to create something really very pretty. I'm going to show you how to make a little pocket, and I'm also going to show you how you can use dies. If you have a closed die like this one, how you can use that to go on the front of parchment so that your parchment actually becomes the backing for your dies and really helps with the imagery of Christmas there. So I'm going to start by showing you the papers that I've used to make all of these things. Let me tell you about the papers that I'm using for this project. I happen to be using papers from a kit that I created and which is in my Etsy store at the moment. I'll provide a link to that below this video. It's called Chilly Backgrounds. And they have a seasonal theme to them, but of course you can use any papers that you have. I just like to find lots of new different ways of using my own papers. So I've printed out two. I think there's 10 altogether in the kit and then 3 matching tags as well. But I printed out 2 on ordinary photocopy paper, and I've printed out 2 more on transfer paper. And if I put them on the reverse of the printed papers, you'll be able to see just how beautiful these look. I really like working with parchment. I love it. This isn't parchment, it's not vellum. This is transfer paper that I have printed out, and you can do the same because transfer paper or printed vellum can be quite expensive, but if you just put this straight into the paper drawer of your printer, you can print out your own. And I think the effects are wondrous. I love these. I often print these out and use them just as pages of interest within journals. And this is the type of transfer paper that I'm using. I bought this online a long time ago, Amazon UK. I got 135 sheets, it's A4 size, you can see how thick it is. And I don't have a link, I'm afraid, but this is the transfer paper that I used. And I'm going to show you some ways that you can use background papers or any papers that you have to create other things other than journal pages. And making journals and making cards use basically the same skills, and if you can do one you can transfer it to the other. So I want to give you some ideas. So here's my first example. If you have a nice open die such as this one, you can layer up white card and your parchment like this. The frame of your die is what is glued and then sticks to the parchment, and then you can add it to a card. Now on this card I've ripped my other different type of parchment paper here, and maybe you can see I have a sewing line going down there. If I turn it over you can see. So that's how I've held that piece of parchment in place, because one of the things about parchment or printed transfer paper is that glue will show through. So you're looking for ways to cheat that and adhere things to cards or projects without glue showing. So this is one way. Now I could have tucked these little trees under like that, but I've decided that I'm going to glue these in place because it gives me an opportunity to show you another way to attach them. So just as the parchment was attached to the reverse using the frame of the die, I'm going to use the little dots representing baubles and ornaments as a way of adding glue so that it won't be seen, and then I'm going to go around the outside frame of the die as well to make sure, oops, there's another one, to make sure I've got as much glue on those little bits as I can get, because it's only going to be a thin stream of glue, and that then will allow me to stick it onto the card without it being seen. I've made a little pencil mark at the top here so I know the right height to attach it. And then I'm going to use a really heavy weight just to sit on the top of that and give it a moment to dry. So that's one card made using parchment. I quite like that. I quite like having this really beautiful printed transfer paper on a die like that. And the die that I've used is one from my favourite things. I've had it in my stash for a little while, and it's called Christmas Tree Window. And all I did for these projects was go back through my stash and find some old dies that I hadn't used for a while. I'm sure we all have those, and it's lovely to revisit them. Now next I made some cards. So I made 3 cards, and I wanted to use this metallic cardstock that I had, but I also wanted to use the parchment paper. So I used them together. I've used a rectangle of metallic card on the back, then I've cut down a piece of the parchment and I've stitched around the outside edge. So I've captured those 2 layers, the metallic layer and the parchment layer, all together by sewing them on that edge. And again, that helps me get around the problem of using glue. And I used a die which spells hugs. It's this die here. It's, again, just go through your stash. I could have used Smile or Happy Christmas or Happy Birthday or anything like that, but I wanted to use this die. This is where it comes from. I believe it's a Scandinavian company. I can't remember if it's Danish or Swedish. Again, it's a die that I've had for a long time and I don't get enough use out of, so it was lovely to go and rediscover it. And I cut it from white cardstock and I glued that directly onto the parchment, and that makes a really beautiful card. I used exactly the same technique for this. I used my alternative parchment that I had the 2 pages printed out, you might remember at the start, and I used my browner one, and I used this rose tinted metallic card, and I did exactly the same, and I used a gold base and I used the rose cut from the die. I actually layered up 2 of these dies, so I cut 1 layer from ordinary craft cardstock, then I cut a layer from the rose because I wanted them to have a little bit more height, and I glued the rose on top of the craft, and maybe you can see it gives it just a little bit more depth. It stands out a little bit, but it works really beautifully with that parchment because of the brown elements, and that pulls all of those colours together. And I really enjoyed making these cards. I got a little bit lost in doing it. It was really lovely. And then I used the rose tinted metallic card as my base, and also for the top, and you can see how it changes the colour. So with this one, it's the same parchment paper, but this is layered onto gold, and this one is layered onto the rose coloured metallic card. You can see how it changes them. So it's a great fun way to get even more out of your printed transfer paper. Staying with cards, I made this card using this die set. This has got 2 sets that say Smile on them, and it's double the smiles from My Favourite Things. If you don't know them, they're an American company. They do some beautiful things. And this time I used craft card as my base. I used one of the cutout pages. So these were the pages that I printed just on ordinary paper, and I used that as my background, and then I cut a frame from the same kind of craft cardstock to pull everything together, and then picking up the red in the background of the paper, I used my die to cut out the word Smile, and I put it within the frame. But I backed the frame, and I hope you can see it, with plain transfer paper. So this hasn't been printed on, this is plain transfer paper, and that has the effect of subduing the background design. So if you, this one isn't so bad, but if you had an image or a piece of paper that was really vibrant and strong and you wanted a word to stand out against that background, one way to do that and allow your word to come to the fore is to soften the background by putting some transfer paper over the top of it, and the frame again, is another way that you can glue the parchment paper down, because you just put your parchment paper down, put your frame over the top and glue the frame, and then the frame captures the parchment and the background of the card as well. That was, again, that was a really nice fun card to do, so I've done quite well with my card making today. And finally, I made this pocket, and this is a pocket that I will use in my journals. I took a piece of ordinary parchment, or transfer paper, I keep calling it the wrong name. I took an ordinary piece of transfer paper and I folded it, and I left enough room for a fold at the top. I had an old hole punch that does this nice scalloped edge, so I popped a little scalloped edge on it. And then I cut down a piece of parchment paper that was the same size as the front of the pocket to create a front panel. Then I cut out from white cardstock another of my old dies that I found in my stash. This one is called Bursting Berry Vine Border, and it's from memorybox.co.com. The number is number 98981. I've no idea if that's still available because I've had it for quite a long time. And I attached it to the vellum with some sewing. Again, a little line of sewing just around the bottom and the sides of my pocket. And that will go into one of my journals because that just is so pretty. It's just really, really pretty. So I hope that has given you some ideas for different ways that you can use parchment, and you can print it, which I find just amazing. I love the fact that you can print it to suit your own designs, and you can use it to make some beautiful cards. They don't have to be festive cards, of course, that just happens to be the background that I have chosen to print off. But that's not bad for an afternoon's work. I'm really pleased with those, and I hope it's given you some great ideas. As always, thank you very much for your time. Thank you for watching. And until we meet again, stay safe and take care.